Hello, intercultural studies class. Mr. Mellison here, and I am going to attempt to do the assignment that I want to give you all today. So this is kind of an example. So I've chosen to film my own worldview description or articulation, and I have my notes right here in my office, and so here it goes. So this is kind of the kind of thing that I'm thinking. So hi, my name is Johan Mellison. I am 41, and I think when it comes to my own worldview, I would say I'm a pretty typical Canadian Western thinker, being born in Canada and raised in Canada, and aside from some traveling, haven't really lived in other places of the world besides that 1 year in Sierra Leone. I think that kind of thinking has been pretty ingrained in my head. So, for example, when we read the Laisu villager story and I hear about the doctor and the complexities that he was facing, I totally resonate with that in terms of I would definitely be somebody to think about the connection of sanitation and health, and to draw a real kind of scientific clear line there. I wouldn't naturally go to like the evil spirits thing or the that would not be a natural part of my thinking. So in terms of like the Western thinking, cause and effect, scientific method, that's definitely something that is I resonate with, I guess. Other things, when I think about the six frames from Hofstede and the six values from Lingenfelter, those kinds of things, I would say there's a lot of those that I like to value, like the non-Western things, the collectivism or being person-oriented, being non-crisis-oriented, being a holistic thinker. Those things, I like the idea of a lot of those things. But I think when it comes down to it, I would land mostly on the typical Canadian or Western thinking side. I think at the end of the day, I think I value my own choices over a true collectivist culture. I value freedom and liberty, and I don't want to stop anybody in my family from doing what they want to do. I think I like the idea of being person-oriented as opposed to task-oriented, but at the same time, if there's a meeting like Mr. Noctegal, he runs really fast, to the point meetings. I love having my time valued and just being out of there in less than an hour, so I'm free to do my thing and I'm not there for like 3 hours. I like it when church is done in an hour and a half or less. So I'm pretty time task oriented at the end of the day, although I want maybe to be person oriented more. The crisis non-crisis thing, I think I want to be someone who's kind of like taking things as they go and flying by the seat of my pants maybe, but I think at the end of the day I want to also be prepared, which is more of a Western style of thinking as well. Having said that, though, there are some things I think that are different from me and maybe other typical Western thinkers or Canadians, people that have grown up in this context. When I did those tests, I think I start like the values test, I score a bit higher on things like holistic thinking. Evidence of my holistic thinking is I try to not use absolutes like never or always. I usually try to leave room for kind of nuance, or I generally don't like to make absolute statements. I think getting to the personal side here, I think that is a big reason, because of my restorative practices training has taught me and through my work at school is when harm is done, it's rarely a black and white situation. It's always, the restorative training has taught me to draw questions out or ask questions in a way that draws out stories. And there's, it has led to some, seeing the world less in a black and white kind of way. Another thing that I score high on is uncertainty avoidance. I have low uncertainty avoidance, which is not typical for most, I think, people who grew up in this context. So that means that I'm pretty adaptable. I'm okay with things. Now, this is compared to people from my culture here. So, but I'm pretty okay with things going in different directions. Bus is late. I'm pretty okay with that. I'm pretty okay with nothing really phases me. Sorry, not nothing. That's an absolute. Rarely am I fazed by things. Looking back at why that is, I think that definitely has to do with my upbringing, I think, and my parents. I don't think I've ever met two people who are less easily fazed than my parents. A few years ago, they have a pretty big property. They hosted a big, huge family reunion, and cousins and aunts and uncles. They had 85 people tenting and staying on their property, trailers and stuff like that. And they just do that kind of thing, no problem. Whereas like at my own house, having just friends over and feeding dinner, it can be like a cause of stress of like how to do that. This is pre-COVID, of course. So I think I'm more adaptable, I think, than people typical from my upbringing. So that's a few things of how I'm similar and maybe different from my cultural perspective. I think when it comes to my individual worldview, I think, I need to name that I am looking at the world through a straight white male gaze. And I think how that impacts how I see the world is there's an ease or a comfort with which I am able to kind of walk through life that others might not have. So there's rarely a space where I enter that that I don't feel comfortable in because of like my gender or skin color. And then because of that too, I have the natural privilege of people usually taking me seriously on face value. There's not usually a hidden like question or like something that, where people aren't taking me seriously just based on how I look. And I also have more access than others because of that. I remember being in Sierra Leone and I could get a meeting with almost anybody. The Minister of Education was in town. I could go have that meeting. I could go talk to the paramount chief and no problem. And the only reason for that is because I was a white man. So I think what could happen there in terms of how I see the world is I could end up thinking that I'm a pretty big deal, if I don't check that or if I don't kind of look carefully at that. So that's it's an important kind of aspect of how I look at the world. I'll just name a couple other things that are individual to me that in my own upbringing or experience that I think influences how I see the world. One is I grew up playing sports quite a bit. Lots of different sports, and I love sports, and I've just had tons of time on teams and coaching even, and so I think the way that has impacted my worldview, one is valuing a work ethic. You can't be successful in sports without having a high work ethic, and then the other one is being a team player. So the idea of valuing a team and putting aside your own expectations for the good of a team is something that I value. Another thing that's unique to my upbringing, I think, was I have 3 sisters, but we always had a ton of foster siblings, kind kind of come in and out of the home. It was rarely just the four of us. We often had people kind of swinging in and out. And I think what that did in terms of my upbringing, or in terms of how I see the world, was I have a pretty loose definition of a family, perhaps. So I've seen family and experienced family in a whole bunch of different ways. That led to us, our oldest was adopted. And yeah, I think that's an important kind of impact on how I see the world. So that's a little bit about my worldview.